Looking great. What's up, brother? Good, how you doing? Look how intense you are.
So has this changed?
It has, a little bit.
This goes to here.
Correct. And I think that's it.
Let's take the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's everything else is still the same. my slides are working. Just so they're sensitive. I think this mic is hard too. Oh, they're in order. Well, I don't think of but
It's not the law of worship. We continue to discuss
I'll just minimize it so you can put it back up later. For some reason my slides were closed, so sorry about that. Good morning, and welcome to a celebration of life, and frankly, a celebration of the afterlife. So this morning there's going to be several speakers. They're going to have a chance to share their ideas and connections to Earl, but we're going to start with a song. So I'm going to ask, it's one of the great things about congregational singing. I know in an a cappella group like this, we can pull this off in an amazing way. So I'm going to ask for you to stand, please, and we will start with this song. To Canaan's land I'm on my way, where the soul never dies. My darkest night will turn to day, where the soul never dies. Dear friend, farewell, no tear dimmed eyes, where all is love and the soul never dies. My life will end it, deathless sleep where the soul never dies, and everlasting joys I'll reap where the soul never dies. No sad farewells, no tear dimmed eyes, where all is lost and the soul never dies. I'm on my way to that fair land where the soul never dies, where there will be no parting hand and the soul never dies. To sad farewells, no tear dimmed eyes, where all is love and the soul never dies. Amen. Be seated, please.
Good morning. I welcome you. I wish we could have just a copy and paste for tomorrow morning with the sound of your singing. If we could just transpose that every Sunday here, that would be beautiful. That'd be great. So come on back. That's an open invitation that Earl would appreciate. I'm inviting you back to church here tomorrow morning. We are here to remember Earl Wilkerson. Many of us called him Earl Jack, and even Gene called him Earl Jack. And one time he said to me, "You know, Mike, I just go by Earl." I said, "You better tell those hundreds of people who call you Earl Jack all the time." He was dear to us, is dear to us as a minister, an elder, a fellow worker, a neighbor, a preacher, a counselor, and a friend, and he did it all so well. He was helping every person feel that he cared. He was good at that. You are probably here because you had a conversation with Earl, whether it was face-to-face, he gave you a call, and it was probably many times you can look back on Earl interacting with you like that. He was a guy that made you feel like you mattered. And he was echoing the idea that we all matter to God. Earl would direct us today. I'm just picturing his reaction. He wouldn't want a picture up front, but it was my idea, you know. He wouldn't want the flowers. He would stop with that. Because Earl would have wanted us to direct our emphasis on our loving God. This God that grabbed him by the heart and didn't let go. Didn't let go through his whole life. One time when we were meeting about Bible classes, we were trying to get across what should we have as goals for our kids? And Earl piped up right away. And he said it as if this is all we need to do, almost like this is the end of the meeting. He said, let's just make sure our kids know how wonderful God is. The rest will follow. The rest will follow. That was an idea that grabbed his heart, and he just maintained faithfulness to that idea throughout his whole life. It is very difficult to know how long he served as a minister because he never really stopped. Once he got started, he just kept going, and he would accumulate people around the world wherever he went. I mean, it could be down to Sheets, and he would acquire a couple more people that would then be in his circle of concern and circle of love. He was moved by the love of God shown through Jesus Christ. I was looking back at some bulletin articles, back at some sermons, before the tape player started eating the tapes, and I had to stop playing cassettes because it just wasn't working. I wanted to show you, let you hear some of that, but technology didn't work with me. But he was all about God's love and grace. I think we all who have heard him preach would agree with that. That this idea of God's love was such a moving concept. And it reminds me of one of his favorite passages from 2 Corinthians chapter 5. For Christ's love compels us, because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. We don't regard anyone from a worldly point of view. Something has changed because we grabbed onto the idea that God wants to reconcile with us. And as a result, we look around not at just people, but as people loved by God, people that God wants to see in his family. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And so today, as we share words, as we share memories, as we share thoughts about what Earl meant to us, it's always in the language that Paul uses in Philippians. We thank God for you. We thank God for all that we remember about Earl. That's the starting point that he would want for us today. As we begin, let's pray together. Heavenly Father, at this time it is a joyous gathering of those who knew Earl, who appreciated him, who saw his faith and his faithfulness to your word and to you personally. Father, we know that in Earl's life, he experienced a relationship with you. He walked with you, he saw you in the stars and in the birds and in all of nature, and tried to get that across to us in his sermons and in his lessons. And we thank you that we got to delight in a person who found his joy in you. We thank you for his wife, Jean, and for her faithfulness through all the years as well. And we know that he loved her all the way to the end. We know that their example of marriage has led so many. And we pray, Father, that you would guide her and be with her as well. Thank you for this opportunity to say goodbye in our special way and to honor you through our memories. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. The way this will unfold today, I made a plan and then we completely changed it. So the way it will unfold, various people will come up and speak, and we'll have some other things. We have some musical numbers as well as another congregational song to sing. But at the end, it's just going to be an open mic. And I hope that you have something that you would like to share. We encourage that you would just come forward. The way we're going to do this, if we can try to do it, if you want to say something at the end, you'll just come to the front pew, and we'll just kind of line up, and when it's time, you just come up from there. That way, everybody gets a chance to speak, and we move things through pretty quickly. If we could all keep our thoughts to about 5 minutes, that's hilarious because Earl could never have done that, but to try to honor the time for everyone else. So we'll start with Steve, who would like to say some things.
Good morning. And that's an interesting segue. When have you ever known me to limit it to 5 minutes? I will do my best. There are people in this room that knew Earl longer than me, but I can definitely tell you exactly when I met Earl. It was December of 1979 when Donna brought me home to meet her family. I also met her church family, and prime among those was Earl. I'm going to add 5 minutes by breaking up all the time when I do this, sorry. But Earl played a major role in converting Donna. And if he hadn't done that, we would have never met in the first place. But he, along with Rudy and Nancy and Jan, played major roles in her conversion. So I was happy to meet him and his family that holiday season that year. Some of you know this, you may not know this, that later, about 9 months later, as it were, he officiated at our wedding. So that was another connection that I had to him. Then we moved here instead of staying in Tennessee, for goodness sake. But so we came here, and that's when I really got to know Earl, as he became a true friend and a mentor to me. I was very resistant to the idea of becoming an elder, but between him and Buddy, I got pushed through the door. So here I am. But he was there, always helping me to learn, to grow, and to become a better man, and thus become a better elder for this congregation here. There's lots of stories I could tell, but I'm going to limit myself to just one thing. You know, we're all going to have the urge to come up and tell everyone here who's come here to honor Earl, who Earl was. And we're all going, oh, really? I didn't know that? No, we're all going to go, oh, yeah, that's right. So let me tell you just one story. I've told this before, but so forgive me if you've heard it. But the one thing I wanted to mention was that Earl had a Corvair. Some of you know what that means. Some of you weren't even born in the 60s, so let me explain a little bit about it. Corvair was an interesting car. It had a lot of innovations built into it. In fact, there are things still in cars today that were first done in the Corvair. And there were lots of people that loved it. It had all kinds of things going for it until Ralph Nader came along and said it was the most dangerous car on the road. So that gave it a black eye. But it had quirks. It had a rear engine in it, not up front. It was in the back. It was all sorts of stuff going on with it. Had a suspension system that was brand new, that we still use today. Had all sorts of stuff. One of the things I remember, some of you may not have even been aware of this, who were around back then and remember the Corvair, some of the models had an automatic transmission where you changed the gear with push buttons on the dash. So here we go, push the button in to put it in drive, push the button, put it in reverse. Very strange, you know, but it was supposed to be modern. We were moving into the modern age. You know, we're headed towards flying cars, and this was our first step towards flying cars. Anyway, there was all sorts of quirks and lots of interesting stuff about it. But Ralph Nader said, this is a terrible car, and that sort of spelled its doom. Eventually, sales dropped, and Chevy said, well, let's bring out another car instead of this one, and they did. But Earl had one that he loved, and he kept long after its expiration date. I remember riding around in this car, and he had to tell people, careful, don't push too hard on the floorboard. I swear I could look down and see the road go by. Maybe that's a false memory, but that's what I remember, was looking down one time and going, okay, there goes the road. The brake fluid leaked. He had to put brake fluid in it just to drive the car and carry some with him. So in case, you know, he would check it if he was sitting somewhere for a while, he had to put, you know, some back in it so we could drive back home. And so that was fun. You know, I was like, okay, let's make sure we don't drive too far and lose the brakes, you know, as we were going somewhere. And when he parked it at home, he had to put rocks under the tires so it wouldn't roll away. And no matter how much Jean told him, you got to get rid of that car, he hung on to it. I think she finally wore him down. That plus it wouldn't pass inspection anymore. So he ended up probably about a year or two later, after all of that, finally getting rid of it. I tell you that story, I mean, it is amusing, but it epitomizes Earl. He looks at people the same way he looked at that car. We all have quirks. We all have things about us that make us strange to other people. But he didn't care. He loved everybody. And he wouldn't give up on you. You could hit bumps along the way. You could have a fender fall off. Whatever it was in your life, he would never give up on you. And so I put that there for you, that his love for that Corvair, hanging on to it with all of his might, trying to keep it for as long as he possibly could. That's the way he was with every single person he met, including all of us who are here in this room. So I just just wanted to leave you with that. That's the thing I remember most about Earl. Never gave up on anyone, because that's just who he was. He was God's disciple who looked to be God's person on this earth, to share him with everyone, to bring them into the fold, and to keep them there. So, I've gone about twice as long as I was supposed to. I'll finish with that.
Good morning. My name is Jim Ice, and Earl and Jean meant a lot to my family. In fact, to this day, when our kids refer, it's always Earl and Grandma Jean. And I think Jean may be on the webcam this morning, so we want to show our love and respect for her and tell her we miss her and love her. But I want to share with you a little bit about Earl's humor. You know, Earl and I would banter all the time. For example, today, I'm sure he would, the preacher count of the group here is at least 1,000 people here this morning, for his worship. And I used to do an imitation of Earl. Can I do it for you? Yeah. Anybody that knows Earl knows that there were always pens, and every Bible was completely marked up, And I used to tell this joke about Earl all the time, and I'd go to camp and do different things, and he loved it. He laughed every time. So I'm going to tell it for you. And it was when Earl was out of Camp Concern, and his car broke down. And unfortunately, he had to get a tow truck. And they were towing it all the way back to town. And he realized that was going to be a really expensive trip, so he was trying to convince the guy that maybe cut the cost a little bit. So he's talking to the guy, and he says, my friend, truck driver, I'm just a poor preacher. To which the truck driver said, yeah, I know, I've heard you. Yeah, I know, I've heard you. That's kind of what he did as well. He laughed kind of like that. The other thing I want to share with you about Earl was he was extremely influential. He could convince people to do almost anything. There are people in this room that cut wood for him, that helped him do so many different things. He convinced me to dress up in a clown outfit with full clown makeup and go to Camp Concern in the middle of July, in the heat, where I'm melting, to do magic for the kids out there. And he convinced me to do that for years and years and years. When finally I said enough, he convinced the song leaders at the time that were here at this congregation, Mark McKee, Brian Nost, Steve Miller, and myself, to come out and to sing for the kids. And we did that for a bunch of years. But Earl was so influential that he encouraged us to continue to sing and to continue to sing. And eventually, we added some actual talent to the group by adding Susan Lee and Doug Schultz as part of that, and was born a group called In His Time. In His Time started 30 years ago and sang for 10 years, and Earl was always there at our rehearsals. He was always the one encouraging us to do something. As it turns out, they're here today. And so I'm going to ask them to come forward, and we're going to give a tribute to Earl in only the way that we can as In His Time. So if you guys could come forward and do that. Now, Susan Lee would normally sing with us. Susan had hip surgery on Thursday, a hip replacement. I'm sure she's online as well and missing that. But as these folks come forward, I want to share with you one other quick activity and story. I should have also mentioned, by the way, there was another member of our group. As Earl called him Little Dougie Fields. And Little Dougie Fields was responsible for our tech. Yeah, so he was responsible for our tech. Are our mics okay?
Check one, check.
Okay.
A hand for Doug Fields.
He's come such a long way, little Dougie Fields. But just 2 weeks ago, on a Wednesday night, we were studying Philippians. And you remember in Philippians, hey guys, I'm talking here.
Sorry. We haven't seen each other in 10 years. Not at all.
In Philippians, where Paul says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. And someone mentioned in class that night that was a pretty good illustration of Earl. Because as Paul said, he would prefer to go be with Jesus, and thankfully God has allowed that to happen for Earl at this point. But he kept Paul behind for the benefit of the Philippians and others like us. And he did the same thing for Earl. So the song we want to sing for you, hopefully, today is called I'm Going to Keep On Working. Because that is exactly the mindset that Earl had. Kept on working.
Oh my gosh. Make up your mind.
Nobody wants to stand by you, Brian.
I know,
Just
right?
face the facts.
Ready, 2, 3, and I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, till he comes. There's nothing in this world worth turning around to see. My eyes are on the prize that's awaiting me by and by. And I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, oh. Yes, I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, till he comes. There's nothing in this world worth turning around to see. My eyes are on the prize that's awaiting me by and by. And I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, oh. Well, there's work to be done, lots of victories to be won. There's joys up the road that have never yet been told. There's treasures that we need that by faith I see. And I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, oh. Yes, I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, just till he comes. There's nothing in this world worth turning around to see. My eyes are on the prize that's awaiting me by and by. And I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, oh. There's a message to be preached, lots of souls that have to be reached. There's hungry to be fed, little children to be led. River flowing free, and it's souls that's in need. And I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, oh. Yes, I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, till he comes. There's nothing in this world worth turning around to see. My eyes are on the prize that's awaiting me by and by. And I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, so. Yes, I'm gonna keep on working till he comes, just till he comes. There's nothing in this world worth turning around to see. My eyes are on the prize that's awaiting me by and by. And I'm gonna keep on working,
Gonna keep working.
I'm gonna keep on working,
Gonna keep working.
I'm gonna keep on working till he comes. Whoa, yeah.
When we put the word out that we were having this service, there were some people who knew they couldn't come, and so they sent me things to be read on their behalf. And one of those people is Eric Bedwell, and his family were instrumental in keeping this congregation alive in the early 80s, late 70s, and we appreciate the Bedwells so much. So this is from Eric Bedwell. Good morning, everyone. I truly wish that I could have been here in person. I miss seeing the church I grew up in and seeing Pittsburgh, but life and plans took me and my family in another direction. Life is this complicated set of moments that are collected as memories in our minds to reflect and hopefully learn from. If we don't, we are doomed to repeat our mistakes. When a loved one passes away, I don't think we ever truly understand the silence that it brings. There are no more voices to hear, no more laughs to be heard. We lose that sound they make when they come into a room. We are here today to honor Mr. Wilkerson, as I called him growing up. But as I got older, I reached this age or point where I could now call him Earl Jack. I was surprised when I heard of his passing. It felt like just yesterday when I was texting him or calling him to talk about my parents passing away. Had it been that long? Time was playing games with me. I remember overhearing my parents talking one day about a preacher from the Whitehall Church of Christ that was coming to be our minister. I was just a young teenager, I believe. I didn't know much about life or really anything. Earl, Jack, and Jean came and brought several families along with them and grew our church. Earl Jack was never shy about asking me how I was or what I was up to. I asked him about his limp one day, and he shared how he got hurt playing football, I do believe. Another time, I was riding with him somewhere, and I noticed how many miles he had on his car. I asked him if he was going to get a new one soon. He said no. If you take good care of them, they can run for a long time. I remember him from Camp Concern. He did a lot, kept himself busy. One time he asked me if I wanted to make some money. I said, what do I have to do? Dig a ditch. It took me all day, but I made $100 that day. But one thing I never realized until I was much older was one thing he did for me, and that was the example he set for me. In this world, we don't get many good examples. God sent his son down to earth to set an example of how we should live our lives as Christians. Earl Jack, I know, wasn't perfect, but he was a good man. He was a good person who set an example for me, as well as many others here at this church, for a young teenager to look at and pattern a life to live. That speaks volumes. I never realized how many men in this church did just that. I don't mind saying their names because of Camp Concern and this church and VBS and youth rallies and fellowship dinners. I met so many people, had so many positive influences stacked in front of me to see. Jim Ice, Mr. Fields, Rudy Buys, Mr. Rogers, Jan Swenson, Mr. Teagarden, Mr. Albig, Mr. Sharps, Al Johnson, Art Gardner, Mr. Morey, and the list goes on and on. But I digress. The fact that Earl Jack never shied away from preaching the gospel showed me how much he loved God and the people around him. He was a person who wasn't swayed by the world. I'm sure he had his days, we all do. But I am thankful for his guidance, and I am sure that it has led to this church being where it is today. God placed him here and has placed all of you here. The legacy that God has built here at this church through Earl Jack and Mike started long before they came, but has been built here to be a strong foundation for decades to come. I am thankful that Earl Jack was placed here for me to see it as an example of how I should grow and pattern a life well lived around. I am sad he is gone and that I will never see him again on this planet, but I know where he is and who he is with. He is in heaven praising God and chilling with my dad, Art, Rudy, Buddy, and many others who have gone on to be back where it all began in eternity. I want to thank Mike for allowing this to happen, allowing me to speak these words to all of you. This church was built in 1969, and I met God here and was baptized in that old building next door. So was I. So it meant a lot to be able to say a few words today, because this church has some sentimental value. Thank you all, and God bless you all. Eric Bedwell. I'd now like to ask Christy to come up and read something that Earl's best friend wrote about him a few years back.
Maybe I should go later. About a couple months ago, I found this in my dad's Bible, and I sent it to Mike. Oh, my dad and Earl were best friends since I was 3. I'm 53. 50 years of my life, so Earl was kind of like a second dad to me. Earl, I felt like, lived at our house, and we lived at me and my brother. We mowed his grass. Way back in our Whitehall days. So a lot of life at in Whitehall than here. So before I read this that my dad wrote to Earl, and I don't know if this was at a birthday party, I don't know if he gave this to Earl, I just found it in my dad's Bible, but last night I took my mom to her 60th high school reunion party in Mount Lebanon, and I was talking to one of her friends, Pat. And I was telling her I'm taking Mom tomorrow to the memorial for Earl, and she said, I met Earl. 1983, I think she told me. I was in the hospital, and he came to visit me. That's who Earl was. It wasn't just the church. Wow. Melanie will tell you he became best friends with her dad. There's so many people that, oh yeah, I met Earl through whoever. That shocked me last night. I was like, even Earl went to visit Pat, Mom's high school friend, when she was in the hospital. And one word to describe Earl to me is faithful. That's him. Faithful friend, faithful servant. It was all about you. And I always called him an Energizer bunny. You know, there was nothing to hold Earl down. I'm sure he told you the story of one time he fell when he was living at his house and the birds started circling around him. He's like, I gotta get up. It didn't matter when Mom's been in the hospital over the past couple years since Dad has passed. He comes in with that limp, parked who knows where because he didn't know where to go, and he was good. You know, he was a tough cookie. Nothing could put that man down till he was down. So I'll read my dad's letter that he wrote about Earl. Earl's life has been a life of love of the Lord, and love of God's creation, whether it be the birds in his backyard or each of you. If Earl did not see you, he called you. My dad got sick in March of 2019 of cancer. Not a single day passed that Earl, maybe 3 times when he was in the hospital, or a handful, that Earl did not call my dad till the day he died. Earl came out, my dad passed on a Wednesday. Earl came out on Sunday to our house and read scripture with Dad right before he passed. Faithful, faithful friend and servant. So again, if Earl did not see you, he called you. If you had personal problems, he was sitting with you in your home. I bet that's some of you here. If you were ill or needed medical treatment, he would be at your side in the hospital. When a loved one had died, Earl was there, praying and giving comfort at the funeral. You could count on Earl to pray for you. So many of Earl's sermons were sermons of love. Earl lived a life of love. Earl was and is a man after God's own heart. Earl will do everything that God wants him to do. Thanks.
Next on my list is Diane. You're ready. She's putting her camp whistle on, so that gives you an indicator.
I'll take this in. Listen up, campers. Yes, Jim and I have known Earl since 1983, and 1984 was my first year at camp. So Earl and I used to talk a lot about the fact that the word coincidence, air quotes, is not in the Bible. You remember? Oh, I'm sorry. His was more. And also the fact that the things that we go through in life prepare us for what happens next. Well, it so happens that in 2019, we took a trip to Gulf Shores. Now, I was fixated on going through Mobile because my ancestor had fought in the war there. After we got there, I thought, I could have had a lot better options in flight plans if I'd have gone through Pensacola. But that being what it was, we found ourselves checking out of a condo in the morning and then languishing in the Mobile airport all afternoon. So I was a little miffed and then reconciled to several hours of people watching. And a few weeks after this, I wrote some words down about that decision. Witnesses we were, bystanders for a large story in a small airport. First to arrive were wife and grandmother and 2 young flag wavers in tow. Then great-gram in a wheelchair, followed by a parade of sisters and brothers, nieces and nephews, all waiting, all watching for one person to appear in the hall. And finally, there he was. Celebration, hugs, laughter, and tears. Well, the bystanders had a few tears. Bathed in the golden sunlight of the late afternoon sun, there he was, dressed in battle fatigues, combat boots, duffel bag, a soldier, safely back from the battlefield, home again. Heaven must be like this, except for the wheelchair. When I heard that Earl had passed, I thought about this, and I saw Earl as that soldier safely back from the battlefield. It wasn't until maybe a week ago I remembered one of his favorite songs was, "I'm a hard-fighting soldier."
Hi, everybody. I'm Jan Swenson. And if you look around in the room, you'll find I'm the only oldest guy here, I think. Earl and I go way, way, way back, over 50 years. I knew him when he was a preacher at Whitehall. And Rudy Buys came to me one day and said, how about if you would, my family and your family would move to Holiday Park and talk Earl into coming there and being the preacher. So I agreed to it, and Rudy's family and my family showed up one Sunday morning, and I'm not sure when it was. I think it was 1979, but somebody's told me it was maybe 1982. At any rate, it was at this little building over here, way over here, that's the far end of the connection to this building. And there were 17 people there that morning. And I was glad to hear from Eric Bedwell, because Ron Bedwell, his father, presided over everything. Up until Earl came there, Ron preached, sang, presided over communion, and did all the praying with this little congregation. But Earl came there, and that little congregation of 17 people grew and grew and grew until we have this wonderful church that worships here. And it's a commercial. This is a wonderful church, so I'm sure if you come tomorrow, you'll agree with me what a wonderful church this is. And it's the work of Earl. It's his testimony. It's his monument to what he did. And I think a rare talent that Earl had was that he could get along with everybody. He could deal with little kids at Camp Concern or VBS. He could go to nursing homes and get along with little old ladies in wheelchairs and everybody in between. And he could deal with them and encourage them. Now, remember, Earl knows things about people in his congregation that they don't necessarily want the public to know, because we're a great big group of sinners. And Earl knew a lot of sins. He knew a lot of sinners and the sins that they had committed. And Earl was such a good person to talk to that he could deal with all of these people and to hear what they had to say about their troubles and the fact that they had not done what they had hoped that they would have done, and things that they might be a little bit ashamed of. And Earl could relate to those people and hold them together in a congregation. And I remember one time talking to Earl about that. It's remarkable that you held a congregation together, and I don't remember ever having any kind of potential splits or factions among people. That Earl was a ability to keep everybody happy and getting along with one another. And I asked him one time about that, and that talent you have. And he said, I'm a grace man. Everybody deserves grace. And nobody deserves to be judged. And that was a talent that he had, and that's what he exercised when he presided over a congregation. I got to see him do a lot of things. We were elders together. We worked on Camp Concern together. We did a lot of things together before each of us got kind of decrepit and unable to do that kind of stuff any longer. But he was able to keep it together that whole time. This congregation just kept growing and growing and growing. And then there was one thing about Earl that I really loved. Jim showed you all the colored pencils he had. If you'd say to Earl, he kept the Bible like this everywhere he went, this little New Testament. And if you said to Earl, I have a question about Hebrews 4:12. What do you think about this? And Earl would open up his Bible to Hebrews 4:12, and you'd look at it, and the whole thing was underlined. And sometimes it would be red, sometimes it would be blue, sometimes it would be black. And then you'd say, well, how about Matthew 5:14? And you look at that, and it was all underlined. I said, how do you tell which is important and which is not? He says, well, I used to think this was more important than that. So this was in black, and now I put it in red. So that was an anecdote about Earl, his patience, his care for people, and the fact that he was a grace man. Isn't that a wonderful thing to think? That he looked at everybody in the congregation and said, God's grace is poured out on all these people, and poured out on him. And that's where he is now.
Thank you, Jim. Earl's family was not able to be here. They had a service down in Georgia where he would be buried. And for that, his daughters, Linda and Terry, put together a letter, and they asked me to read that today. So my next task here is to read a letter from Linda and Terry. Dear Dad, we hope you know that you have been the best guide through the twists and turns of life's road that anyone could wish for. No problem was ever too big for you to solve, from broken dolls to broken hearts. We always knew we could bring it to Dad, and you would fix it. You were the dentist that pulled loose teeth, the carpenter that built the doghouse for our latest stray, the veterinarian who doctored countless animals we found and brought home, the rescuer of escaped hamsters that got stuck in the sofa, the hairdresser getting gum out of hair, and the teacher patiently helping us with math word problems. By the way, we still don't know when those two trains leaving St. Louis and New York will cross paths, but it's not because you didn't try. When life's road took us into the teen years, you were there to make sure the boyfriends were properly interrogated and intimidated. At the time, we may not have felt appreciation, but looking back, that was really you saying, I love this girl, and you, young man, will respect and treasure her like I do, or else. You were the long-suffering driving instructor, risking life and limb and high insurance premiums so that we could get a license. And then you were the mechanic, fixing the damage when it turned out we really weren't so good at backing up or parallel parking. When life's road brought us to a fork where we traveled on our own paths, you were still there to help us navigate and steady us when we stumbled. And it wasn't just us. You gave your time and effort to countless others. You have touched lives around the globe and helped untold numbers find the road that leads to the only home that matters. Whether it was sitting all night with a family at a loved one's bedside, picking up a weary traveler at the bus station and bringing him home to stay with us for the night, giving your time and compassion to orphans in India, counseling a couple having trouble, or just comforting a homesick child at Camp Concern, your journey has always been about putting a supportive arm around your fellow traveler's shoulders and a steadying hand under his elbow. We want you to know that when the turn in life's road came 2 years ago and you needed our help, we consider that the greatest honor of our lives. Being able to give back to someone who has always been the giver is a precious gift that both of us will treasure until life's road lets us meet again. Our journey goes on, but we are privileged to have walked the last mile of our journey with you. You are sorely missed already, but leave the porch light on. We'll be coming home soon. And stop watching the clock, Dad. It's not curfew yet. We love you, Terry and Linda. And then Jean found a poem that she would like to be read, and she passed this along through their other daughter, Phyllis. And I want you to think about Earl and Jean having lived together, and the way they lived together was she's in one room, he's in another, for decades of time. I remember the Ivanhoe apartments. I remember their home out on Wright Road, and it was always Jean in one place, Earl in another. Sometimes they're together, but living life like that. And this is the poem that Jean found and wanted to make sure was read today. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I, and you are you. And the old life that we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way, which you always used to. Put no difference in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effect, without the ghost of a shadow on it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute, unbroken continuity. That line sounds like Earl. He would use these big words out of nowhere, and he had very long sentences, if you ever listened to his sermons. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well. Nothing is hurt. Nothing is lost. One brief moment, and all will be as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again. Now I'd like to ask Jim McCamey if he would come up.
Well, good morning. I'm Jim McCamey. I'm an elder here. I've probably known Earl less time than 90% of you. We didn't get here till, I think, 2004, maybe, something like that. But what I do know from what I'm hearing today is it doesn't matter. If you knew him 50 years, if you knew him 50 days, if you knew him 50 minutes, God blessed you for knowing him. The other thing that I take away from hearing all these stories, everything, is the consistency, which is rare among people today. If you had met Earl 50 years ago and you met him today, he's the same person. Same beliefs, same attitudes, same approach to life, which was grounded in the Bible and the faith that he had. I had a whole bunch of other stuff to cover, but then everybody's already said it because of that consistency. But there were three things that I take away from knowing Earl about his focus on people, which you've heard about before, the promise and the praise that he had. Jan mentioned patience. My example of Earl's patience there was that I served as an elder with Earl and Steve Miller. If you can imagine being in the room with Jim McCamey and Steve Miller, you have no patience. Jan mentioned knowing what Earl knew about people. And let me give you a little insight into an elders meeting. He did not come in and say, hey, Bobby did this week. Let's pray for him, or, things like that. Or, hey, Ann did this, we've got to solve her sin problem, things like that. He brought people's needs. When he talked to people about their sin, that stayed with him. That stayed with him. Even in the elders meeting, that was something that he kept private. What he brought to the elders meeting was, Ross needs help. He's been through surgery. There's nobody to cut his grass. Who are we going to find to help him cut his grass? Lucy lost her mother last week. We need to provide some food for that family. Those were the discussions we had in the elders meeting. He met people's needs. We met Earl before we even got here. We were moving from Corning, New York. Ann said, where we can worship. And she went online and she found the email addresses for all the congregation in this area. And she emailed everybody. Earl got an email from a woman who said, my family needs a church home. We have 2 little boys who need to be raised learning about God. And Earl answered. And that's why we're here. That's what he did when he touched people. On the promise side of things, I first saw this in Earl. We were having one of our Sunday night singings, I think. And people, you say, well, what song do you want to sing? And you throw out the songs. And I threw out number 515 in our book, which is on Zion's glorious summit stood. It's this vision of the future. It's this vision of the promise that we have. It's this hope. And Earl, at that point, Earl turned and looked at me, and I could tell that he had that promise. And that's what his life is about. For himself, for others. But you could see in him that he believed that promise. When we read in the Bible about hope, that man lived it. He knew that this was just a temporary place. And that was the promise that he lived. And that was consistent throughout his life. I didn't know him as long as you did, but I always saw it. And then he would talk about being out on his back porch. Remember that? He would say, I was out on the back porch and I saw a woodpecker, right? Or he would talk about the clouds. And he saw God in nature. What I want to close with is Psalm 145. Maybe David wrote it, but it's Earl's words. And it's praise. It's looking at nature, it's looking at the world, it's looking at God, it's looking at the promise, it's looking at the people, and it's praise. I will exalt you, my God, the King. I will praise your name forever and ever. Every day I will praise you and extol your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. One generation commends your work to another. They tell of your mighty acts. They speak of the glorious splendor of your majesty, and I will meditate on your wonderful works. They tell of the power of your awesome works, and I will proclaim your great deeds. They celebrate your abundant goodness and joyfully sing of your righteousness. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made. All your works praise you, Lord. Your faithful people extol you. They tell of the glory of your kingdom and speak of your might, so that all the people may know of your mighty acts and the glorious splendor of your kingdom. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your domain endures through all generations. The Lord is trustworthy in all his promises and faithful in all he does. The Lord upholds all who fall and lifts up all who are bowed down. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food at the proper time. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. The Lord is righteous in all his ways and faithful in all he does. The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. He fulfills the desires of those who fear him. He hears their cry and saves them. The Lord watches over all who love him, and the wicked he will destroy. My mouth will speak of the praise of the Lord. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever.
Good morning. My name is Mickey Casey, and I have two jobs today, so I got two things. Okay. This is a letter that was written by Carolyn Garman for Earl's 80th birthday in November of 2015. And it's pretty cool. It even has a little smiley picture of Earl on it, which is good. Let me read this to you. It's entitled, There Was a Man. There was this man we didn't know, a man we had never met. He came walking into the coffee shop that day at Children's Hospital in 1976. My husband and I were passing time waiting for the surgeon's report. Our oldest son, Mike, age 11, was undergoing that drastic surgery. This man introduced himself. Apparently, our church friends had told other church friends what our family was facing. In my mind's eye, I can still see the three of us meeting for the very first time. He didn't know our family at all. We were merely names of some of God's children. Yet this man knew we would be a family needing God's strength like never before. God brought Earl to us that day long ago, and now decades later, God is still bringing this precious person to our family. Thank you, friend, for stepping into our lives. I am grateful and blessed because of your life. Carolyn Garman. Now, I think we can probably say that. Each one of us can be grateful and blessed by his life. A lot of people have said a lot of the things that they remember about Earl, and I remember a lot of things about Earl. 99.9% of them are excellent. And when we came to Holiday Park, my family was young. Mike and Barb were young, and we started out to go. A church we were attending was having some problems, and we had young kids, and we needed a place where we thought they would learn something and finally, be raised right, like Jim McCamey talked about. Well, we started out for Crossroads 3 times to go. I said, well, I know this guy. We can go out there. But my car broke down every time we went. Now, if you talk about cars, I could totally relate to cars. I mean, the car I was driving was a car Barb used to drive when it would catch on fire riding down the road. But people would say to Barb, hey, your car's on fire. She said, no, it's not. It just smokes. No, it's on fire. It was. But it was a good car. Anyway, you don't get rid of cars just because they catch on fire. But we left for Crossroads 3 times. Every time something happened. We never got through the Fort Pitt tunnels or wherever we were going. So then we came out here because my sister lived out here. So let's see what it's like. It always looked kind of smallish and odd to me. And we walked in to that little building over there. And Earl was preaching about, I remember exactly, he was preaching about how to raise kids and discipline and all this kind of stuff. And I looked at Ruth and she looked at me and we're like, this isn't so bad. This sounds good to me. And so we came here. And it changes the course of your life. Earl changed the course of my life a bunch of times. And when Jackie was a little girl, her grandfathers had died years before she was born. She didn't have a grandfather. So she's going to school, and you know, they have Grandparents' Day and grandfather this and grandfather that. And so she, because she's Jackie, decided she needed a grandfather. And so she said, I think I should ask Earl to be my grandfather. Would he be my grandfather? And I said, I guess he would. Let's ask him. We'll ask him. And he said, I'd be proud to be your grandfather. And he would buy her Christmas, or, you know, presents and birthday presents. Now, I'm sure Gene was the one doing all that, but you know, he was a good guy, but he wasn't. He was a guy. But he was her grandfather for as long as she needed a grandfather. And when you talk about someone who has, it's been mentioned already about how Earl would keep your secrets. He would know who you were and love you anyway. I remember the time I went to meet him at his office over at Eaton Park, and he wanted to ask me. He was asking me about becoming an elder, which I thought was hilarious. And this was my first stint as an elder. Go back to Jim McCamey and working with Steve and Earl and Jim all together at the same time, and refer to that as to why I left. No, I'm kidding about that. But I remember sitting down with Earl because there were things that he needed to know about me. And I told him, I said, Earl, you don't know what I've done. You don't know what I was like before Christianity. And I told him some horrific, hair-raising stories. And the look on his face never changed. The look on his face never went, oh, wow. You know, it was never like that. It was, and I told the whole story. I don't know if I'd ever told the whole story. I can give a Devo at Camp Concern for an hour and never tell you the real story. But I told this story to Earl Jack, and he never flinched. I mean, not even an uncomfortable gesture. He said, well, are you sorry? I said, yeah. He says, and you were forgiven, and you were baptized. I said, yeah. He says, well, what do I care what you did? And that was that. It was all over, and I'm just like, when he hears this, I won't have to be an elder. It'll be great. I mean, this is my ticket out. I can keep floating. But it didn't work out that way, and I was stuck and trapped. But I'll tell you one other thing about Earl. And he changed the trajectory of my life when he asked me if I wanted to go to Camp Concern. Now, my only contact with camp is I had brought Jackie and Mike, Mike and Barb out there a couple of times. But get this, we were late sending in the form, believe it or not. Lynn Gardner, we were late sending in the form. And we had never done camp or anything, and we call the number on the brochure, and we get Earl's house. And get this is, hi, y'all, you have Rachel Wilkerson. And I said, Ruth, come here, listen to this. Because we didn't go to Holiday Park then. We were at 5th and Beechwood still. And I said, Ruth, you got to listen to this. I said, who are these people? So that was my only real contact with the Wilkersons before that. But when Earl Jack brought me to camp, everything changed. I had a raison d'etre. You know, there was a reason to do what I was doing. And I love the fact that there's decorations, and Diane wore her staff badge. Mine's still in my car door in case I lose it. But I remember times when we would be just me and him. He was the director, I was the assistant director after a couple of years. And we would hear things about these kids. We'd hear things about the way they were being raised, or what was happening, what was being done to some of them. And we would stand, I can remember it like it happened yesterday. We would stand right outside of his door. I'd stand on his porch. I'd make that long walk from the assistant director's side to his side. And we would kind of cry. And Earl would say, this all has to end soon. He said, this has to end. And he meant the bad stuff, but he meant this. He wanted Jesus to come. Not because he was tired, but because of the pain that was being inflicted. And I don't want to be a downer here, but I just want to say that Earl Jack Wilkerson taught me how to be a lover of people. He taught me how to look out for kids. He taught me how to care about other people. And he taught me the most important thing. He taught me that elder face he had. So that when people tell me stuff, I'm like, I just play board games in my head. I hear it, but it just stays in there. And I learned that from him. And I just want to say that all the sweet potato pies I used to bake him a sweet potato pie every Thanksgiving. And he would always say it was the best he ever had. And I know he was lying. Because he's from Georgia. I'm from Oakland. I'm from West Oakland Heights, man. But he always told me, he said, don't change anything. That's the best sweet potato pie I ever had. I'm like, yeah, sure. So I know he wasn't perfect. He was lying. But a couple of Thanksgivings ago, I didn't have to bake Earl pie. There was no pies. No more sweet potato. And I don't bake sweet potato pies anymore. Because I miss my friend. So I don't make them anymore. Plus, I'm too fat. But I'm glad you're all here. And I'm glad that you love Earl like I loved Earl. And sorry, I think I went over time. And this isn't even mine.
You know, I appreciate the comments that so many have made, and thinking about how you've been impacted, I want to illustrate something. Where did Earl grow up? He grew up on what kind of farm? A dirt farm, he called it, right? He called it a dirt farm. They grew dirt. And he had an Uncle Easy, and his best friend was Stafford Shaw. Exactly right. He included those in so many of his sermons, and he had that natural ability to communicate with you, not preach at you. But I will tell you that I used to share with Earl, and I believe this firmly, that there was one thing Earl did better than anything else, and it was funerals. Kind of an odd thing to say, right? But he had a unique ability in funerals to support those that had a loss, to encourage them, but at the same time, challenge them in a way that was very unique. He would call and ask to put together a group with, again, a congregation like this, an a cappella. It's easy to find folks to sing, and we would bring a group together and we would go sing, and I got to hear dozens of Earl's funeral eulogies. And they were all his best sermons. And almost every time, frankly, we sang one song. And I'm going to ask that we stand together. Well, you don't have to stand. You can sit. And we'll sing it together, though, at this point. Abide with me, fast falls eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee,
we're coming to the end here, and so those of you who do want to share some thoughts, we're going to have a song next. Is that right? We have a song next. Again, In His Time is going to sing for us. While they're singing, if you want to make your way down, that would be wonderful. And it won't be formal. You can just take turns and share your thoughts. Again, just be mindful of the time here. I love that we sang that song. One of Earl's scriptures that he came back to often was John chapter 15, talking about the vine and how we are the branches and Christ is the vine. And if you remain in me or you abide in me, then you'll bear much fruit. And that is Earl's life. A person who discovered who God was, what God was all about, and then delighted in being a child of God. And I want to end by coming back to where I started. In 2 Corinthians, Paul says our task is to try to persuade others, to try to help others see that they also can be reconciled back to God. And Earl would want me to make sure you know it's not too late today. But if you need to be reconciled to God, that's more important, he would say, than this memorial service. That you today would know you were right with God. That all those promises that we sang about in the first song, the second song, the song they sang about how there's nothing in this world worth turning around to see, that needs to take hold of your heart. And if it hasn't, then the opportunity is always there. The opportunity to respond to the gospel. As we mentioned, it's something that grabbed hold of Earl's heart. And then he lived it. He would use the term experiential. And he meant every day he got up and he walked and talked and looked around and saw God. He experienced God every day. And some of us would listen to that and we would say, what do you mean? But I'm thankful that we had a guy who was that enthralled with how great God was. And I think he truly did experience God day by day. And he would say, that opportunity is yours as well. So I didn't want to have any time go by without making sure that that was said. Earl and I were fellow workers together. It was my delight to work with him. He never treated me like I was a trainee, even though I was. I was green as green can be. He treated me as somebody who's just in ministry with him, shoulder to shoulder. Would take me with him to visits, would take me in his office. We met every Wednesday morning, every single Wednesday morning. There's been a lot of Wednesday mornings that we haven't been able to meet. We would argue sometimes. We argued literally about 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, about what happens when Jesus comes back, which is very apropos for today. And he said, no, this is going to happen here. And I said, no, I see it the opposite way. And it was very good-natured. We were both smiling at the end. We weren't that angry with each other or anything, but just sometimes disagreed. We were fellow workers together. He taught a lot of people. He helped us to have the right kind of focus, the right kind of passion. And so I hope that even today, some of that is reignited for you in your life. When you look back on your own life and you look back at a friend like Earl. Today we're going to wrap up here. So as In His Time sings, then feel free to make your way down and we'll share together. So, gentlemen.
When we thought, boy, wouldn't it be an interesting way and a unique way to dedicate and kind of show our honor and love for Earl, there's a specific song that we always sang. Now, we sang this song about heaven and about getting inside the gate and about the future and how we were looking forward to that. As we were preparing for this time around, we realized that it's a slightly different version we'd like to share with you today. You're going to hear three voices sung. You're going to hear the voice of a weary traveler saying, man, when is time coming? When can I go? When can I go? You're going to hear the voice of Jesus inviting and rewarding. And you're also going to hear the voice of the traveler that has made it to heaven Earl. And the way that they respond, he would respond today to what God has done for him.
Oh, how happy I will be when my journey here is run, and I look upon his face, and I hear him say, well done. You have fought a faithful fight, and my child, you kept the faith. Enter now, my joys are yours. So just step inside the inside the gate of home, sweet home. No more to cry, no more to die. A crown of life I've won. I'm safe at last, no sorrows past. A mansion here forevermore. And all of this I heard him say when I stepped inside the gate.
Just inside the gate.
Inside the gate.
Just inside the gate.
of
Just inside the gate.
sweet
Just
home.
inside the gate.
No more to
Just inside the
cry,
gate.
no more to
Just inside the
die.
gate.
A crown of
Just inside the
life
gate.
I've
Just
won.
inside the gate.
Safe at
Just
last,
inside the gate.
no sorrows
Just
past.
inside the gate.
A mansion
Just inside the
here
gate.
forevermore.
Just inside the gate.
And all of
Just inside the
this
gate.
I heard him say
Just inside the gate.
when I stepped inside the
Pearly
gate.
gate.
Inside the gate.
Just inside the gate.
Inside the gate.
Just inside the gate.
of
Just inside the gate.
sweet
Just inside the
home.
gate.
No more to
Just inside
cry,
the gate.
no more to
Just inside the
die.
gate.
A crown of
Just inside the gate.
life I've
Just
won.
inside the gate.
You're safe at
Just inside
last,
the gate.
no sorrows
Just inside
past.
the gate.
A mansion
Just inside the
here
gate.
forevermore.
Just inside the gate.
And all of this I heard him
Just
say
inside the gate.
when I stepped inside the gate.
How you doing? My name's John Dean, and I just wanted to say some things about Earl and a few things about the history of the church here at Holiday Park, I should say. I'm a transplant like Steve Miller. I married a girl from Pittsburgh in 1977, and in 1979 we moved here to Pittsburgh. She was raised here, like I said. And so once you marry a girl from Pittsburgh, they just won't stay here for the rest of their lives. So we moved up here in 1979. And I happened to meet Jan Swenson I was going to Fifth and Beechwood at the time because we lived in Swissvale. And so I happened to meet Jan Swenson in 1979, which I don't know if he remembers that or not. He probably didn't remember me then. I don't know if he remembers me now. No, you do. But at any rate, he was going to Fifth and Beechwood. And so we were there for 2 years, and then Carl Webster was the preacher there, and his wife, Gloria, helped him. And so then we moved out in 1981 to Penn Hills, and I was looking for a church because I didn't want to drive all the way down to Fifth and Beechwood. And so I was calling around, and I called this Church of Christ Monroeville, and Ron Bedwell answered the phone, and I said, well, I'm looking for a Church of Christ out in that area. And he said, well, why don't you come out to Holiday Park? And I said, okay. I didn't know where it was, but anyway, I made my way out here. And by the way, Jan Swenson in 1968 wrote the charter for the first building over to my left, all the way to the end, the old building. And the reason I know that is Harrison Boring gave me the charter, and it had signed by Jan Swenson in 1968, okay? And Harrison started the church in the Monroeville area in the 50s. And then they went to the Stone Church, which they purchased in Monroeville, right across from Eaton Park. And then the city wanted it back, so they sold it, and then they built the church building there in 1968. But I was not there till 1979. And so I came out here, and I just want to give you, we didn't have a preacher, okay, like Jan already said. Not Eric, but Ron Bedwell, he was doing everything. He was an insurance adjuster, okay? And he did everything. He did the communion. He did everything, the song leading, the preaching. And he did it twice a day. I mean, twice on Sunday, in the morning and in the evening. Amazing person. And so we were looking for a preacher, okay? I came in 81 out here, August of 81, because that's when we bought our home out this way. And so there was Howard Sharps had come out from 5th and Beechwood, and there was Bob Teagarden, and there was myself and Bill Watterson, and I believe that was it. And we met with Earl downstairs, and so we were looking for a preacher, and we said, well, we don't have a lot of money because we were paying $1,200 a month on a loan for the building, and a church in Tennessee, a Church of Christ in Tennessee, was helping us with that payment, and we were picking up the rest. And so we don't have a lot of money to pay you, Earl, but he was looking for somewhere to preach. He was at Whitehall, like Jan mentioned, and Christie, and so anyway, he said, we said, well, it'd be a stretch, but maybe we can come up with $25,000 a year, okay? And he said, because there was only like 13 of us at the building here at the time, okay? And so he said, okay. And I don't know the particulars, but maybe Jan and Rudy picked up the rest of it. I don't know. But anyway, and he agreed to come out. He says, okay, I'll come out. So he came out here. And then it went from there. And there was, like I say, there was 13 of us here. And some of the people are still here with us. There was the Teagarden family and their daughters. There was Kathy Hoffman, which was one of the Teagarden girls, and her son Brett. And, of course, Bob and Lorraine Teagarden. And then there was the Bedwell family, Ron and Vera. And there was Eric and Ron Jr. And then there was a lady named Mary, and then there was me and Sandy, and then in '82 Ron was studying with a wonderful lady by the name of Olive Reese. She is still living, and when she came here, Ron was studying with her, and then Earl picked up the study when he was the preacher, and she was baptized, and I'm still happy to say she is still living today, and she is 100, she's born 1922, 100, 103, 105, is she 100, maybe 105 now? She's born 1922, she told me. Same year my mother was born. Okay, so she's 103, and she's still living right now, and I know she's in a nursing home, but maybe, I don't know, maybe she can hear us, I don't know, but Earl baptized her, and she was with us for many, many, many years until she got to where she had to go to the nursing home. But she did a lot for this church, and she put money into this church, especially the second part that they built onto. And Rudy Bies did that too, put a lot in that second part. But at any rate, Earl worked very hard. And what I remember about Earl is he was always so gracious. And like everybody has said here, he loved everybody. But I want to talk about his works a little bit. Because when Earl came to us, and I'm not trying to bore you, but this is important. He preached Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, went to the hospitals, okay? He came to the hospital when my two children were born, okay? First one in 85. And he visited the sick. But what really impressed me about Earl Wilkerson at this place, New Kensington Church of Christ needed a preacher. And Earl, for over a year, he preached here, and he would go out there to New Kensington Church of Christ. They didn't have a preacher then. And then Paul Barton came. But he preached there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then he would come to Holiday Park and preach at 11 o'clock in the morning, and then he still preached at night. And Earl was a hard worker. And he did a lot of sermons and baptized a lot of people. But it is a blessing that Paul Barton came along, and he took that church over. But Earl made that church go until Paul came, and Paul's a wonderful preacher of the gospel. He's here today. But Earl did those two jobs at the same time, and then I think on top of that, if I'm not mistaken, he sold phones for Rudy Bies when Rudy Bies had a telephone company or a telecom company of some type, and Earl sold phones on the side in the weekdays when he was doing all the other things. So Earl was a hard worker. He loved the Lord. He loved many people that are here today. They know this. And so we were just blessed to have him. Sorry I took up too much of your time, but I thought you may like to hear a little bit of what went on before we have the wonderful congregation we have now. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I think I've known really what I wanted to say on this day for many years now, because when you take the time to celebrate someone and talk about their life, the things you say are what this person was to you. And if you were me, you knew exactly who he was to you. because he was my partner. And if you know me really well, you know what that phrase means. But today, you've had a lot of people coming up and talking to you about when they met Earl at this time of their life and in this year and how long they've known them. I can't speak to that, but I can say that I've been hearing his voice, hearing what he's had to say before I was even born. So I'm speaking today, right now, on behalf of everyone who's in that boat. The people here who saw him standing right here, and every other week, just speaking truth and speaking love. But he's my partner, and I know this because he told me it every Sunday. This came from an experience that me and him had, because back a while ago, we would recruit, and we would go out into the neighborhood for VBS. And as a kid, you usually were partnered up with an adult. And the purpose of that is so that, the adult can talk to the adult and the kid can talk to the kid. And I would always talk to the kids, and I would say, you should always come to VBS, it's so fun. And of course, I loved VBS because I thought it was so fun. And he had a love for it that was, I think, definitely went deeper than my appreciation for it. But, he explained it to me very simply when we were going together. We were partners. He was my partner. And everybody that knew him knew that's how he thought of you. You were never it was never he was the preacher and you were the attendee at the church. He was never the old wise man and you were the kid. He was a partner. He was a friend. So now I'm at the time where I stand up here and I'll say a prayer. I'll sing a song with you all, and it doesn't feel right to me a lot of the times, because this was the place where, I heard words of such strong truth, and power, and love. So, but even though I feel like that, I feel like that the things I say up here are never, ever going to be enough. He never felt like that. And he's always was, and he still is my partner. And I always loved talking with him, but now I feel a strong sense of envy. Strong sense of envy for a large group of people right now. There's a large group of people that who've never met Earl, but now they're meeting him, and they're experiencing something very special. No matter where they are in life or where they're coming from originally, they're his partner too.
Hi, I'm Robin Boysel. I'm not an elder here. Everybody else said that. I have two quick stories, and one, I hope Jean's on Zoom because it involves her too, but the first time Earl and Jean came to our house, I think they were checking us out to see if we should be able to come here or not. But they were visiting, and I made a meal, I think, and we sat and we were visiting for a little while, and I don't know how long it had been, but evidently it was long enough for Jean because she was hitting Earl with her hand under the table. But I didn't know that, but Earl said it. So he said, well, he said, I guess we're ready to go, because Jean keeps telling me, she keeps hitting me on the leg. So Jean, I just want you to know I feel you, because women, husbands and wives have those little things that we say or do, or an eyebrow raise or something, so you're able to talk to each other. But bless his heart, he went ahead and just said it out loud. So the other story that I have is sort of goes along with Mickey. It's about a pie and about lying. And so it was at the end of his time on Earth, and we were taking turns taking food. So it was my turn. So we had already been told by his daughter not to give him any sweets, and to make everything healthy and all that. And I thought, crap. So I called him and I said, Earl, I'm bringing your food out today. Or tomorrow. Is there anything special I can get for you? And you know, I'm thinking he's going to say a Frosty from Wendy's, or he's going to say, you know, a Dairy Queen, whatever, Buster Bar. No, he said a pecan pie would sound really good. Well, there was a lady in our congregation. She's on Myrtle Beach now. But I do not want to make a pecan pie, because Joy Summers was like the pecan pie woman, and she made one for him all the time, and so I said, oh, I can't do this. So I called Oakmont Bakery. I called Giant Eagle. I called Sam's, every place that would sell pies. It wasn't the season. That's what they all said. It wasn't the season. Well, I wasn't going to go to Earl and say, sorry, Earl, it wasn't the season. Because I didn't care that he wasn't allowed to have sweets. Whatever he was asking for, I was going to take to him. So bless my heart, I made a pie. And it was the lamest looking thing ever. I didn't make my own crust, but I made everything else from scratch. And I took it out there and I said, Earl, I know you want a pecan pie, and you probably had pictured in your head the one that Joy would bring you, but I'm sorry you got the robin one. And so he said, oh, I'm sure it's going to be great. I said, well, do you want me to bring you your food now? Or he said, no, I think I just want a piece of that pie right now. Okay, so he's going to eat it in front of me too. So I said, all right, well, so I cut the piece and it fell apart because, you know, it was mine. So I cut a piece of the pie and I gave it to him. He said, oh, this looks amazing. Oh, this looks so good. And then he tasted it. He said, oh, this is the best pecan pie. I said, Earl, I know you're lying. But he still wanted me to feel good about what I had done for him. So that was just the beginning of our time knowing him and the end. And it was all great. So just wanted you to know, don't ask me to make a pecan pie, I'm not.
Come on, you guys didn't think this was going to be short, did you? I'm little Dougie Fields, and I am not an elder. I am the treasurer here, though, now, and I've been a deacon for many years, and now I've moved into the role of treasury. But I just wanted to share a little bit of what I knew Earl as, which was a lot of things. And I'll leave a lot of room for everybody to continue sharing downstairs. But I, like Christy, and in the I knew Earl since I was 3 club. I'm in the 1,000 plus club, and how many sermons I've heard Earl preach. VBS, I don't know how many verses of pulling the weeds I've heard. For those that know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Camp, simmer down, campers. Simmer down. But some of the greatest moments was just being with Earl out at his house. I would go over various times and be helping with different things when I was a teen, when I was in my 20s, when I was in my 30s. And if you knew Earl, he had a lot of interesting things out there. And he had a bulldozer. I said, Earl, why do you have a bulldozer? He's like, well, you know, something needs bulldozed. So I'm a I'm a teenage boy, and I'm like, hey, I'm like sitting up in the bulldozer. I'm like, is anything to be bulldozed? He goes, it ain't got no brakes. I was like, well, how do you use it then? He said, very carefully. I don't know if it just didn't have brakes for me or if it really didn't have brakes, but I think it probably didn't have brakes. If you knew Earl, as was already shared, he would definitely meet you at your need in the hospital. Andy was ill at one point with Sammy when she was pregnant with Sammy. And obviously it was very worrisome because she was pretty early on in her pregnancy, but she had to have surgery. And we were on a floor that was in lockdown, like you weren't supposed to be able to have visitors. Earl appeared. I say, Earl, how'd you get here? How's Andy? I don't know how he got there. And he asked how Andy was. And I just asked her, I said, when was that? And she said, I don't know. And as I continue to think about it, I think she was asleep. I don't think she ever even knew he was there. But I knew he was there. So he was there not to just comfort whoever was in pain, but whoever was in a different kind of pain. We spoke about the highlighters. When Earl was leaving here, there was a lot of books still left in his office. So we went through a period of like purging some of Earl's books that people could have. And my son loves books and would keep compiling books and taking books home. Every Sunday, there'd be a new pile going home with Ethan. And one of them was his Bible. One of his Bibles. Not his Bible, but one of the Bible. I don't even know. So, I don't know, this was a couple years ago. We were talking about something, and Ethan's like, I can look that up. And he pulls out Earl's Bible. And sure enough, it was highlighted, as was everything else, in multiple different colors. There was one time that Earl did have a short sermon, and it was when I was baptized, almost 30 years ago. My dad had worked on projects in Germany a lot back when I was younger, and he had to go to Germany that morning, or that afternoon. So we were at church, and then he was going to leave. And I told them that I wanted to be baptized, and I was going to talk to Earl, and they were like, well, Dad has to leave by noon. So I remember being in front of where the old kitchen was, now right across from the can room, and I caught Earl down there, and I said, Earl, I want to be baptized today. Oh, that's great, Dougie, that's great. I said, but my dad's got to leave by noon. No problem. So now, having been a deacon in charge of getting people organized for worship, he had to have gone and talked to everybody. And that was the fastest worship we've ever had at Holiday Park. And I know this because I hugged my dad when we did the prayer circle in here, and I looked at the clock, and it was exactly noon. So we had the whole service, including Earl's sermon, and a baptism, and a prayer circle, and it was noon. So I don't remember exactly how fast Earl preached that morning, but it was pretty quick. The last thing I wanted to mention was the last time I talked to Earl, which was last year in February. He called me, and I don't even remember what we talked about, to be honest with you. It was a pretty short call. And then he called me 5 days later, but I think I was on a call, so I had to call him back. He goes, hey, Dougie, what's up? I said, well, you called me. He goes, I didn't call you. Earl butt dialed me. But at that moment, he said, well, how are you guys doing? And he always took time to ask how you were doing. And if there's one thing I would like all of us to take away from Earl's life and how he lived it, Let's take time for one another. You're never too busy to ask how each other's doing.
Good morning, or is it afternoon? Almost. My name is Bob Alshouse, and I was a member here for 16 years, 16 wonderful years. It's okay to get emotional. Where's Michael? Michael, the other Michael? Oh, he just walked out. It's okay to get emotional. Your grandfather's very emotional. And you know, I wanted to speak of Earl's very emotional too. I mean, I can't remember one sermon that he didn't pause, if you will, to get emotional, because he was emotional about his God. He loved his God. Earl baptized me in that other auditorium over there, and he married Debbie and I in yet another auditorium, because this one was being built. So I'll never forget when this auditorium was being built. It was 1986, and we couldn't be married in this auditorium. Earl was also a competitor. I didn't meet Earl until he was very old and crippled. I mean, he must have been 49, maybe? But he was a competitor, and at camp, he loved to play ping pong. And he really was a little bit crippled. He had plates in his, who knows where he had plates. But he had plates a lot of places. But he loved to compete in ping pong, and I was a little bit of a egomaniac myself in those days, and I thought I could play ping pong fairly well. And Earl, I did win more than you did. But he never was an easy out. And like I said, he was a competitor. And he was a dreamer. That's why he challenged his congregations, because of his dreaming. Probably him and the other elders are why this room exists today. He had a dream. So he was a wonderful guy to know, and we've heard all of those stories today about it. I want to comment about camp. Mickey, I believe you are my successor to the assistant camp director. And again, Earl convinced me that I could take a week out of my competitive golf schedule every summer, that I would really enjoy being at Camp Concern. And so I was his assistant, and Earl was noted for his mid-afternoon naps. And my wife just asked me recently, well, did you take those naps? I said, well, I tried. I said, but Earl was quite the snorer, you know. And to be truthful with you, it wasn't limited to his daytime snoring. He talked to God in his own ways. He spoke in tongues, I guess, at night. So, but he was a mentor to everybody in this room that knew him, and he was an example of what we all wanted to be. And one thing I wanted to say, too, that is a little bit different, and that is the first time I had an opportunity to speak at a forum like this, I passed on the opportunity, and I never regretted it, or never regretted it more, I should say, that I passed. And so today, coming down, I didn't know what I was going to say, and Dougie had nice notes, and the lady coming after me, she's got some notes, so I'll try to be different than the bulldozer. I'll try to know when to put on the brakes. And I'm about to put on the brakes. But I wanted to say that I came here for some selfish reasons, too. And you fulfilled all my selfish desires. You took me down memory lane. Because I really didn't know what I wanted to say, or I wanted to think about. But you made me think. You made me think about all the things that this church is and was and how it became. John Dean's historical rendition was helpful as well. You know, you forgot me though, John, but that was all right. I wasn't one of the original 17. I think I was 18 or 19. I'm not sure. But those were growing things. And Mickey, you told me. I know those stories, and I can see why you were concerned, because I thought you were playing back my pre-Christianity days as well. We've all done some very horrific things before Jesus Christ came into our life and cleaned us all up. And Earl recognized that in himself, probably, and in others. And so that I think Earl would want that to be the focus. And I know that we're talking about him a lot, but he wants to talk about Jesus. He never wanted to talk about Earl. It was all about Jesus, what Jesus did for the world and for each one of us. And so we got to be grateful for all that. I'm slamming on the brakes. Thank you.
Got up yesterday morning, got our CD out, thought maybe I should listen to it. Carol came out, and I said, hey, hon, she's not here because her dad's not well, and she didn't want to leave in case something happened. But I said, if I was to say something tomorrow, what would you want me to say? What would you say, Carol? And it's interesting, she said exactly the same thing that I was thinking. I'm not here to share a story about Earl necessarily. I'm going to share a story with you, but if you're a sinner, I hope you all are, because you are. If you're a sinner, I'm talking to you, okay? And I'm talking to you because of me, okay? So here's the story. We were here from 96 to 2006. And Carol and I both grew up in Northeast Ohio. And we were both part of Christian families. Her dad was a preacher, mine was an elder, my grandpa, and we were Church of Christ in Grand. So we grew up there. I was scared to death when we moved here. I was really scared because I'd never been away from home, and now I'm moving away from home. So it was really important to us that we got the kids to a church. So I looked at all the churches in the area. There's not a lot of churches in the area. Long story short, we ended up in Derry, PA, because we were in the middle of 3 different churches. We didn't know where we were going to go, but I knew we could find a church. So before we moved over, we came over periodically on different weekends and visited these churches. And the second time we came, I don't remember which church we visited, but we got done early, and we were on our way home. And I said, hey, there's a church here close in Murraysville. It's kind of early. I mean, what do you think if we just stop and go there? Because it's one of the churches. That way we won't have to come back on a Sunday morning. We'll go there on a Sunday night. So we got here early, and we parked up on the hill up there. You guys are all going to laugh, but this is the way we were brought up. We're parked up there, and the kids are little. And I look at Carol, and I said, do you see what I see? She said, yeah. And Courtney, being the person she is, what do you see? I said, well, you see those crosses on the door right there? Yeah, so? Well, there's probably a good chance they have instrumental music. So, so Courtney was like, I know, well, Leo was too young, but Courtney was like, so what if they do? And I said, well, we probably won't stay. Now, I said all that to say this. I don't like to use these terms, but I'll use it so that you will understand. We grew up very conservative in the church. For instance, we did not eat in the building. Okay? Doesn't necessarily mean that we believed that way, but that was ingrained in us. The point I want to make is, and I'm not bad talking to anybody here, okay? But church, there were big sins and there were little sins. Seriously. And we kind of grew up that way. Mickey, you probably wouldn't have been an elder at one of the churches we were at. I probably would not have been. And I got to tell you, there was moments in my life growing up that I wondered if I would go to heaven. Because was I going to do one of those bad sins? You know. I said all that to say this. I'm going to heaven. I am going to heaven. And I am a sinner. I know that. And I know that because of, and I'm talking about Earl here. I'm talking about this church right here. I remember when we got a hold of Earl, he came out. At the time, we were the furthest ones east, Derry. And he came to visit us, and I couldn't believe it, you know. From moment one, we were accepted. We were part of this congregation. And I'm not talking about Earl, I'm talking about you. Okay? We were instantly part of this congregation. And to this day, this is our home congregation. We were only here 10 years. But if people ask us, where did you guys, go to church? Holiday Park. That's our church. So, if you're a sinner, you can go to heaven. You will go to heaven if you give your life to Christ.
Afternoon. In front of the camera is not where I'm comfortable. I jotted a couple of notes down because of emotions. I'm Terry Doolittle. I have been at this church and have known Earl since 2003. First time meeting him, super energetic and happy. It was almost kind of like one of those weird situations. First time meeting somebody, you didn't know what was going on. And he liked to say things like, well, all right, and that's good stuff. I spent a lot of time with Earl mowing his yard and splitting and stacking wood. He taught me how to drive his gator and all the quirks that it had. I spent a lot of time talking to Earl and listening to him from the pulpit. There are those Earlisms. So a lot of the talking, well, a lot that I can remember that was repetitive were things about things not being worth a plug nickel, about his classmates in elementary school, because he had a very sharp memory, and the teacher that he credits to his grammar and pronunciation. As he looked over his glasses. Pronunciation. About his young boy pulling a tree back and flying his younger brother across the way. How he got in trouble, and how he also tormented all of Jean's little dogs. It's been mentioned that Earl, you just can't keep a good country boy down. Whether he fell in a hole in his yard or through his porch, he was a hard worker and had this invincible, superhuman attitude in the most humble way. Last I saw him was mid-October, before he moved out of the Pittsburgh area. Similar to Robin, we were signing up to take him food, and his daughter Terry had strict guidelines to what she wanted, everything was healthy. And so I also asked Earl, well, what do you want? And he goes, you know, I haven't had ice cream in a long time. And, you know, you try to do the best, so you give him what his wishes are, but doing it, you know, following Terry's guidelines. So I went to the store and I read the backs of all of the ice cream and found the one that had the least amount of ingredients, closest to natural. Here you go, Earl, just a little one. He was appreciative. There was a time that I went out there that I was planning to go out there. And that Sunday, the whole teen group had planned to go out to see him. We were going to worship with him for one last time before he moved in November. And he called and said that he wasn't feeling that well on Sunday. So the plans were canceled. We didn't go out to Earl's house. However, that was the day that I was supposed to take him food for the week. And I thought, Earl, I'll catch you later on in the week. And he was fine with that. So that was Sunday. Monday, he was obviously fine. I wasn't going to go over because he wasn't feeling well. Tuesday came, and he had his caregiver stop by, as well as some family from the church. Wednesday came, and that was the day that I was supposed to go deliver food to him, to kind of break his week up. And I tried getting a hold of him, and I couldn't. And then I started texting Mike, and Mike was on a trip. I tried getting a hold of other people in the church. When was the last time you talked and heard from Earl? And I was just down here at the Y working, and it came a little concerning. But you know, sometimes Earl just didn't know how to work his electronics. Those electronics, I don't know what to do with that. So the plan was I left work, and I just rushed over to Earl's house just to make sure things were all right. Pulled up in the driveway, his car's there, everything's normal. And I knock on the door, it's unlocked, I go in, Earl, and I hear, who's that? And I'm like, it's Terry. Who? Terry. And he had told me that he had fallen. And so I rushed and I put the food down on the counter, and I went to go find Earl. And he had fallen, he had been down for a while. But Earl, in that superhuman attitude, it was, you're strong, come over here, help me up. All right, Earl, he did a great job of convincing me that I should go over there and try to help him up. So I went over there, I tried to help him up, but it didn't work out, and it was a good thing that it didn't. So I started contacting different people who then contacted other people, and now we had this mass of people on their way to Earl's house to help. So I just sat on the floor beside him, crossed my legs, and I said, how's it going, Earl? Like, what else could you do? Let's just sit down and talk. And he didn't want to talk about him. He wanted to talk about me. How are you doing? Because Earl knew those struggles that I was struggling with. Help came, everything went fine. I put his food in the refrigerator. He was okay. You know, and I'm not a nurse, I'm not a caretaker, but I did look over him. He was just rubbed up a little bit. He didn't, not too much pain, and obviously it was, I do not want an ambulance out here. I don't need that. Don't call them. Okay, but we need to call all these other people who are trying to get a hold of you. But he was always focusing on others. As I heard his best friend, Rudy, always say, often, and I will say without a doubt, Earl was one of God's special ones.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. This has been something that we all needed. And I appreciate your patience. I appreciate that you shared so much and shared your lives and shared your stories. We're going downstairs after I close us with a prayer here, and I hope that the stories will continue. And I hope that you will go downstairs and eat, because there's great food and great desserts. Maybe Robin made a pie. I don't know. Okay. The desserts are safe. So thank you again. I'm going to close us with a prayer, and we can head on downstairs. Heavenly Father, it is a joy to be together, to be among brothers and sisters who can share together and laugh together, because you have blessed us with a life like Earl's, somebody who came into our lives with the love that you showed him. And he just was a wonderful person. He was a good man. He was a good friend. Thank you that you can do that. You work through people, and we're thankful, Lord, that sometimes you get to work even through us. And as we look around this room, we're appreciative of each other. And we pray that you would continue what you do so well through people, that you would continue to form the bonds of love that keep us friends and brothers and sisters together. As we go downstairs, Father, thank you that you give us food. Thank you that you nourish us. And thank you that we get to share together in fellowship. And we pray your blessing on this whole group as we remember and as we grieve the loss of our good friend Earl. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. You're dismissed.